All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to call to order the Monday, July 29, 2019 Royal Oak City Commission special meeting to order. We're going to begin with public comment. Prior to public comment commencing, same rules apply that we normally have at the Royal Oak City Commission meetings. We have 3 minutes up here. There's a timer at the podium to help you keep track of your time. We do want to hear from everyone who wishes to speak tonight, so we do limit the time to 3 minutes. Wait till you're called on by me, the mayor, and state your name and address for the record. We ask that comments be directed to the commission as a whole and not to individual commissioners. And we'll go from there. So who's first? Yes, ma'am.
Erica Sykes, 325 Lexington Boulevard. I'm here today because I want to let you know that I'm opposed to the City Commission approving this proposed contract or any contract to keep on recently retired City Manager Don Johnson. I'm asking all members to vote no to rewarding Don Johnson with any deal to stay on while looking for his replacement. In my opinion, Don Johnson acted out of bad faith and with an obvious intention of taking advantage of his long-term employer, the Royal Oak taxpayer. We should never reward a lack of integrity. There should be no reason why taxpayers should have to pay extra while a suitable city manager replacement is found. For the short term, the assistant city manager should be able to guide the remaining 5 administrators that worked under him while the city searches for a replacement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sykes. Who's next? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Tom Howlick, 210 North Center. The answer to this contract is a simple no. It's an outrageous holdup of the taxpayers. It's unwarranted. The city manager has been a city manager elsewhere. He is aware that it takes several months to fill that type of vacancy. 30 days is a ridiculous sum of time to give us and then turn around and ask for a lot more money in return. As previously noted, we have an assistant city manager who should be fully capable after these number of years for filling in temporarily. That's industry standard. You don't go pay somebody a ton of money to stick around for a little while. You elevate other people temporarily to higher positions and maybe recompense them for that. And then you do your looking, and then you put those people back where they normally belong. And I also find it really interesting that Mr. Johnson wants thousands for witness fees. What's been going on down here that he thinks that would be a worthwhile thing to ask for thousands in witness fees? Kind of odd. But the simple answer is no, this is a complete ripoff. It's way out of the line of any salary range anywhere in the country for anything, any city this size. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howlick. Who's next? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Bob Hoff, and I reside at 3107 Marion Drive. Thank you for your service. I have been a business consultant for the past 4 years after serving as Chief Operating Officer and President of an international manufacturing company for 18 years. It is my professional opinion that the $18,000 per month compensation on the contracts that have been recently mentioned is excessive and perhaps unnecessary. After reviewing all of the available information regarding this issue on the internet, the City of Royal Oak retains a staff member with a master's degree in public administration, employs several managers in the finance department with public accounting backgrounds, and all of the public safety and service departments are staffed with appropriate professional managers. I believe the mayor and the commissioners could show some faith that the existing professional team is capable of running our city of 59,000 residents without the oversight of the city manager until one is found. Royal Oak is a mid-sized community, and $18,000 per month is better spent on the activities that impact the community directly. If you insist on the necessity of an immediate interim city manager, in the spirit of community service, I will gladly volunteer to serve as an interim city manager for a nominal amount. I will offer my resume for review if you are interested. Thank you.
Who's next? Mr. Wolf.
I don't know the man personally, but Fred Lieb, he says, call me to talk to a proven CEO for mentoring, executive coaching, consulting, or interim management. Please, Google him, he's fredlieb.llc, or Lieb Partners LLC. He's expert at cutting costs and generating new sources of cash. He was appointed by the governor to take over as EMF for the city of Pontiac, did an amazing job. He arranged for the selling of the Silver Dome to save $2.1 million a year, while we're spending $2.7 million or something to pay the interest on the bonds. He's among his parts of his resume. He says he wants to develop a board or whatever, whoever he's working for, worthy of your time and making transparency worthy of you and your city. Now, he has experience in automotive, city government, chemicals, distribution. He has served as an interim CEO, COO, VO, VP, Director of Financial Planning, also chosen by the Governor of Michigan to run the city of Pontiac, has won the Turnaround of the Year award from the Turnaround Management Association, has an MBA from Wharton. Very prestigious school. He has given over 40 presentations and interviews to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, LA Times, Channel 7, Detroit Free Press, TMA, WJR, and others. He has written 20 articles for Crain's TMA, the Huffington Post, and others. The man is an expert. He has successfully negotiated with 6 unions in Pontiac to reduce employee costs and generated more than $115 million in multi-year benefits. He managed 400-plus city staff, stopped internal dissension, started high productivity teams, sold off assets that generated inadequate returns, stopped the cash bleeding, sold the Silver Dome, saving the city $2.4 million, and many millions more in demolition costs. It goes on and on. The man is amply qualified. Now, what I don't understand is that tonight I can see that this is, it seems to me, an inside job. It's by the people in the audience. Not many people even knew this meeting is taking place and how it's going to affect the future of our city. I am personally outraged. This is a travesty for this man to say that he's going to charge us $18 million a month, and then he will not pay for a DPS worker because that will shut down the city during a time when he felt the budget was tight. So there's a lot of hypocrisy here. Please, I'm not talking so much to this commission. I feel this is a backdoor done deal, and I'm not going to be able to stop this. But if anyone has a conscience here, it needs to stop.
I do need you to finish your last point first.
I know, finish my last point. I'll be speaking to my last breath until the city figures out what to do with this commission and find out that it needs to be replaced. Thank you.
Mr. Wolf. All right, who's next? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Pamela Lindell, 409 Inglewood Avenue. So I'm thinking, Don Johnson, did he give you guys a ransom note when he left this? I mean, come on, and the Chiefs can't handle this? What's he been doing this whole time? Hasn't he been training? I mean, and then I'm reading this article that says when Johnson cooked this up to bring on the chief, so this is going to be such a deal for us in the long run. Is this the deal? Is this where we're at? So we're going to pay Johnson on top of the money he gets. Now we're going to give him $18,000. And you know, if we need him to talk, we can subpoena him, right? I mean, come on, we're going to pay him for that too? I thought there's like 4, 5, 6 staff that's been helping Johnson all along. None of them are competent. The chief's not competent. Nobody can handle this from all the people that you guys picked and have up there. It's not good. It's not good. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lindell. Who's next? I see a hand far in the back.
Good evening. Mr. Johnson should not be entitled to the compensation nearly twice.
Can you have
his
your name
wage.
and address for the record, please?
Sure,
Sorry about
I'm
that.
sorry. Mrs. Shunk, 233 East Webster Road. And I will state this again. Mr. Johnson should not be entitled to compensation nearly twice his wage as an employee. However, the real issue is the last sentence of item 8, return of city property. And in the contract, it states, "This does not preclude Johnson from retaining copies of any document he produced or that was produced under his direction. Nowhere in private or public sector is one allowed to commandeer copies of documents for private use. It is considered property of the company or the government and should remain so." As stated, Mr. Johnson is no longer an employee. He's retired. The city of Royal Oak is no longer obligated to provide legal defense as stated in item 9. Such said legal protection tends to raise more than a few eyebrows in this city. I respectfully request you reject these terms of this contract for Mr. Johnson as private contractor for the position of acting city manager, as well as Mr. Johnson himself. Good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Shunk. Who else is here to speak tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name's Nanette Edgell, 2217 East 10 Mile. This is the first time I've been here, so thank everybody for their time. I am also against this. I'm a controller for a construction company, and never in my wildest dreams have I seen a contract so outrageous. We should not be paying somebody. He is not an employee of the city any longer. He should not be entitled to any of our legal defense. We should not be paying him for transportation. We should not be paying him for anything. If we're gonna be paying him an outrageous amount, it should be all inclusive. This is not. This is something that has been written up. I don't think anybody took the time to read it, but any contract in the private sector would never be allowed with these stipulations. I know, I removed them. I take my time, I look at things. People are supposed to be responsible. I always looked at this city council and I was proud. I am a 28-year member of this community, and it's the first time that I've looked and said, wow, I've just gotten a big one, and I'm not happy. You guys were elected to support and protect us as a community, and right now, I don't see that. Mr. Donahue has been learning how to do all these jobs. There are people here who can do this. I don't see why we need to even offer this. If he wanted this kind of money, or if he wanted to stay employed, he should have kept his job and not retired when he did. But I do not feel that paying somebody twice for the same job is beneficial to anybody in this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edgell. All right, who's next? Mr. Karlowski.
Rick Orlowski, 419 Virginia. Yes, I'm also opposed to this extension. You have a number of department heads who are experienced with a lot of time here, how it's organized. There's no reason that they cannot help out your interim city manager for the 6 months you're looking for. I find it absolutely repugnant. The man gave you 30 days to find a completely new city manager. I think your public works guy has said has already told you he's going to retire by the end of the year, which gives you plenty of time to find another manager. This does not happen in the private industry. It doesn't. Okay, when you move on, you move on. There's occasionally times when people will be brought back, but they're not brought back at a ridiculous amount of money. I would invite everybody in Royal Oak to take a look at what this guy's getting in retirement. I mean, he's getting more in retirement than most of us are going to get working. And you want to add another $18,000 a month on top of that to fill in a gap because he didn't have the wherewithal or the reasonableness to give you 6 months of notice that he's leaving. So now you're rewarding him for stiffing you. We've got people, you've got a director of finance, public works, engineering, everybody else can take care and can handle this, can help Mr. Donahue out while you're looking for the replacement. There's no reason to reward a 30-day notice for a position like this. And hopefully, the next contractor, right, you will have to have him at least give you 6 months' notice before he decides to bolt in this kind of manner. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Kralowski? Yes, ma'am.
Debbie Campbell, East University. I'm going to be brief, but I know that a lot of folks have been saying that you guys do no-bid contracts. Isn't this just another no-bid contract? Let's see, with that kind of money, let's see what kind of talent we could get for $18,000 a month.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. All right, who's next? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Janice Wagman, 600 Wellesley. In December 2015, City Manager Don Johnson proposed the creation of an assistant manager position and Chief O'Donoghue to fill it in a dual role with significant salary increase to $120,000 a year. In the city manager's own words, Chief O'Donoghue is interested in expanding his horizons beyond the police department. He is currently enrolled in a MPA program and is genuinely interested in the possibility of eventually becoming a city manager. This provides him with an entry into general management. It may provide the city with a strong internal candidate to replace me when I choose to retire in 2 years. This was in 2015, and he was predicting a retirement in 2 years. Given these points and Mr. Johnson's sales pitch to create the assistant manager position, and once approved that over the past 3.5 years, Mr. Johnson was obligated to provide sufficient knowledge and training to allow the chief to step into this position, and since the chief has agreed to act as an interim city manager and has almost 4 years' experience as the assistant, I believe retaining his services until such time as either he becomes the new city manager or a new candidate is hired is the fiscally responsible decision. He may not be required to do so by his contract, but he already agreed to do so at a previous city commission meeting. I would highly suggest a bonus to the chief to take on these additional responsibilities in the short term. More money. For at least the last 3 years, this commission adopted strategic goals, including planning for retirement of key positions in city management. Although Mr. Johnson was only required by his contract to give 30 days' notice, his retirement was not a surprise. It was Mr. Johnson's and this commission's responsibility to plan for this eventuality, and it should have started months ago. Beginning with a sit-down discussion with Mr. Johnson about his replacement and negotiating any possible interim contract instead of this last-minute, after-the-fact negotiation. In the event you choose to consider Mr. Johnson's proposal, the terms are $18,000 only if you extend it to the full 6 months. Otherwise, given his 1-month severance proposal, his pay will range from $21,600 per month to $36,000 per month. According to LinkedIn, even $18,000 is more than city managers earn in major cities such as Seattle, Tulsa, Portland, Atlanta, Salt Lake, Cincinnati, and Houston. Secondly, does his retirement already include legal representation for any legal proceeding as a result of his employment as a city manager? If so, that should be stricken from this agreement. If not, it should not be included. Otherwise, this is renegotiating past employment benefits. Finally, why is he allowed to retain copies of any document he produced or that was produced under his direction? Unless it is a public document, he should be required to use the Freedom of Information Act like anyone else.
Ms. Wagman, I do need you to finish up your last point.
Documentation, especially privileged, should be retained by the city, not Mr. Johnson. I hope you reject this contract.
Thank you, Ms. Wagman. All right, who's next? I see a hand in the back. Remember, just as a reminder, we don't permit clapping because if people have an opposing view, it may, excuse me, you're out of order, Mr. Wolf, okay? Please. Mr. Wolf. Yeah. This gentleman has the floor right now, so please, let's follow the rules that we subscribe to. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Travis Moore, 613 Detroit Avenue. I'm going to be kind of brief because I trust that you all will make the right decision that's best for our city. but I did want to point out city managers are expensive. I've done my own research. This comes out to about $216,000 a year, but he won't be here a year. Grand Rapids just recently hired a manager for $250,000 a year. And before people complain and say, well, this isn't Grand Rapids, there have been similarly sized cities. Mount Prospect, Illinois, population 53,930. Last year, their city manager was paid $215,000. This year, he's making $223,000. We are a city with a lot going on. Mr. Johnson has a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of experience with what we have going on. To expect everybody to, like his assistant or any of the other staff to step in and manage this, they clearly have their own jobs to do. So expecting that people can just cover this and their own work, that would be kind of hard to do. Also, I think that it wouldn't be surprising to see a good city manager for a city like ours to be making close to this once we find somebody that's interested in coming here. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. All right, who's next? Anybody else? Going once? Yes.
Emily Bidzrakis, 807 Gardenia Avenue. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to hearing your discussion. I hope that we'll hear it. I just wanted to register that I'm also appalled by the cost of the contract. I just had to spend 2 months doing someone's job because they left with 2 weeks' notice, which is, normal in the private sector, but it's the expectation that the rest of the team pick up that work. I think that given the fact that he had people working under him who have been working alongside him for a while, they should have experience to be able to fill in. Sure, it's not ideal, but $18,000 a month on top of a pension is a lot of money to spend. If we brought in someone else who was going to do it, I can't imagine we'd spend $18,000 on it on an interim basis. And I've heard mentioned, but I haven't looked it up, so I'm going to say that it would be a terrible precedent to set, if it hasn't been set already, in the city of Royal Oak, to encourage people to give short notice and then, someone used the word, hold us ransom to continue to serve us in the same capacity that they just quit. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who's next? Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to close public comment, bring the meeting back up to this side of the table. So that brings us to item number 3, which is the discussion of the interim city manager contract. I guess what I will do, maybe Mr. Gillum, you can kind of kick us off.
Mayor and city commissioners, shortly after Mr. Johnson had given notice to the commission of his intent to retire, effective as of the end of June, I was tasked to meet with him and discuss with him terms to potentially have him come back to act as an interim city manager while the city commission was searching for his successor. That was probably 7 weeks ago that I was first given that task. I've had a number of discussions with Mr. Johnson, a number of phone conversations. We've met several times. We've exchanged a number of different drafts of different types of documents. What you have in front of you tonight is a proposed contract that would allow Mr. Johnson, or provide for him, to return to the city as the interim city manager through the end of the year, or until a new city manager is selected, whichever comes first. As has been noted during public comment, the terms of the contract include compensation of $18,000 a month. There would be no other direct benefits paid. Mr. Johnson would be acting as an independent contractor, not as a city employee during that period of time. There is provision in the contract for termination. On the city's behalf, if there were issues, Mr. Johnson also has the right to terminate this contract, potentially on 30 days' notice. If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those. But again, the proposed resolution would approve the proposed agreement and authorize the mayor and the city clerk to execute on behalf of the city.
Any questions for Mr. Gillum? Commissioner Dubak.
So I am curious about, I think some, great questions and concerns are raised. I'm actually unclear on the purpose of the keeping the documents. What exactly does that mean?
I don't remember that Mr. Johnson and I had any specific discussion or conversation about that. Generally speaking, I know his long-term plans include the ability to teach or consult. So I'm guessing, or would expect that he may be relying upon some of the documents that he was involved in preparing and being able to use those as a template for things that he might be doing in the future. Again, that's an educated guess on my part.
I'm assuming he's just meaning digital copies that he already has access to.
I would assume, yeah.
Is there any security issues there? I mean, do we need to clarify that that would not include any documents that contain personal financial information of residents that he very well could have had a hand in, working with the finance office or anything like that?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're trying to listen up here and concentrate. I appreciate if, yeah.
This is shocking.
I know, but if we could just keep it down so we can concentrate up here, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, that's certainly an issue that could be clarified if the commission feels the need to clarify that. I don't expect that would be an issue with Mr. Johnson. Conversations that I had with him generally never dealt with any kind of personal information for any residents or anyone else. I think he was looking for more from the standpoint of city operations and municipal operations.
I get his intent. Yeah, I understand. I don't think there's any wrong intention in that. I understand why he would want access to the documents that he helped create, for future endeavors. I'm wondering if we need to clarify just that at our end, we're safeguarding our interests and our residents on that issue. And I may not be the best person to come up with all the potential issues there, but I feel like that's a little bit too wide open.
I mean, just off the top of my head, you look at the language in the agreement. I mean, at this point, I suppose if there are copies of documents that he already has from when he was employed as the city manager, I think our options might be limited, but going forward, I mean, if the commission would be more comfortable, then, I mean, my office could be reviewing and approving any other documents that he indicates that he wants to retain. And that's off the top of my head.
Good.
Commissioner Douglas next.
Yeah, was the documents thing, I thought I saw that in his original contract. But I'm scrolling through here and now I'm mistaken and maybe it is just in the new interim contract?
I don't believe that was in his original employment contract.
All right, my misunderstanding. But another question, the question was raised of whether or not Mr. Johnson is eligible for legal representation, meaning I assume if any legal issues come up where he has to that he may be, need to be indemnified. I mean, we would indemnify him as a former employee, right? I mean, because that's in his original contract.
Well, whether it was in his original contract or not, if it's within the scope of his duties as a city employee, the city would be responsible for his defense.
Right. And also, so the interim contract specifies payment if indeed he's called as a witness, as opposed to a defendant. If we did not approve this interim contract with him, and we did require his participation or testimony, would our only alternative be to subpoena him and not pay him?
I'd have to double check the executive rule, the administrative rules for the executive department heads. Technically, the manager's position is not one of the executive department heads, but Mr. Johnson's employment contract, when he was the city manager, references the executive rules. as several of our, and my contract does, for example, too. And so those terms are incorporated into our employment contracts. And again, my recollection is that the executive rules provide that if someone is called back to testify after they are no longer employed, they're entitled to compensation at the rate at which they were paid when they were employed by the city. I can double check that fairly quickly. But
So there would be some compensation?
there would be some compensation,
in that case?
yes, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The only other comment I would make is when I questioned Mr. Johnson about that, he indicated that there was only one time during the course of his entire tenure as city manager here that he had to testify, and that was in a labor arbitration. There were other cases where he was subpoenaed to testify, but my office was able to get the subpoenas quashed, and he did not actually have to testify. So, the chances of this happening, I think, are very slim, but the language in the agreement is what it is.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
And Commissioner Macy next.
So I think you might have said this already, but when Commissioner Dubak was talking, I was thinking he has access already to many documents that he produced and were produced under his direction because they're publicly available. So that seems like quite a number of documents that are available. So I was wondering if that's what, if we could say, well, this is all of it that's available for the moment. If there's something else that you wanted in particular, we need to run it by the city attorney. But I think that's what you said.
That's kind of
Yeah,
what I was
okay.
thinking, yes. So.
And then I wondered if you could clarify.
Commissioner Macy, can you speak into your mic? Can you
Oh, I'm
pop it down a
sorry.
little bit? Thank you.
It's like hiding here. And then I wondered if you could clarify how the severance works. So if we say, okay, your services are no longer needed, we've hired someone new to start October 1st, does he get paid? How does that, just explain to me how that works. Like, what the severance pay is for when?
Depends on when the notice is given.
I
So
mean,
if
are
we-
you talking about the city terminating his services or him
Well,
terminating?
because we know we're gonna terminate, we're seeking out a new city manager. So I guess my point is, are we expecting that he's going to work for 3 months and we're gonna pay him for 4, or something like
You're saying
that?
we've hired a city manager, and they start 2 months from now. And there's a definitive start date of a new city manager, and we know by that, there's a definitive end date for the interim manager. What does that mean in terms of compensation?
If I understand your question right, yeah, there is a potential for overlap. I mean, my read of this agreement would be that once the city commission makes the decision to terminate this agreement, that from that date forward, Mr. Johnson would be entitled to 30 days severance, to 1 month's severance for
So-
$18,000 for that 1 month period of time.
So if it takes us less than 6 months, we will be paying him for 1 additional month that he's not in fact working.
Its contract would expire by its own terms as of December 31st.
Right.
So if the city commission is still looking for a new city manager after the first of next year, there would be no severance pay that would be paid. I mean, this is essentially, at this point in time, July is almost gone, so this is basically a 5-month contract. August, September, October, November, and December.
If I may, Commissioner
Yeah,
Macy, just because I think this is an important question. In the scenario where we know that we're hiring, we know the start date of the new city manager, and let's say the contract ends, let's say that date is December 1st, okay? And we know this in October. We could send a 30-day termination notice, and Mr. Johnson would still work for those 30 days, but we just have to give him the 30-day notice, and then he would exit, and then there might be a week or two gap or whatever between, you know, if it was October versus a December 1st timeframe. But we're obligated to give a 30-day notice, right?
Correct, yeah, and you could allow enough lead time.
But if we hire
So-
somebody and they say, I'm starting tomorrow, then you potentially could have 30 days of compensation to Mr. Johnson, because your 30-day notice wouldn't start till, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then you can debate whether or not there's a benefit to having that overlap in terms of transition or not.
Right.
But-
Commissioner Lavasser.
Let's just get a little clarity on that. Are you saying that the contract provides only that you need to provide 30 days notice and compensation during those 30 days? Or if the contract is terminated with 30-day notice on, say, October 1st, he works through November 1st, there'd be no further compensation, or would there still be a 1-month severance for early termination?
No, it would be 1 month's compensation effective as of the date of the termination. So if the contract was terminated on October 1st, hypothetically, Mr. Johnson, under this agreement, would work for the month of October. He would be paid for the month of October, and that would be the end of the agreement.
Any other questions for Mr. Gillum? Mr. Lavasser?
I'm just glancing at paragraph 7A, and I think there's some potential for confusion there. It talks in terms of 1 month severance pay, which would be indicative of something in addition to what he's being paid while he's actually in employment under this contract. And so I'm not certain that I would agree that this language as written is clear that there would not be a termination pay.
Well, looking at 7A, a majority of the city commission votes at a properly noticed public meeting to terminate Johnson's services. To go back to the earlier hypothetical, let's say that the vote was taken on October 1st. At that point in time, Mr. Johnson, I guess maybe, let me clarify or correct what I said later. At that point in time, Mr. Johnson's services would be terminated as of that particular day. He would be entitled to 1 month's compensation above and beyond that. So he would effectively be paid for the month of October, but he would not be working here during the month of October.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for clarifying that.
Commissioner Macy?
So that's what I was trying to get at. So I liked the way you said it better first. Can we have the contract say that?
I have a suggestion.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Perush?
If we just ended the sentence with, "He shall be entitled to 1 month's severance pay from the date of the termination," would that clarify it? No?
Because termination sounds like
1 month's
end.
notice.
Yeah, yeah. To me, severance after termination indicates he's done working and then gets paid.
Yeah, I agree, and yet I had taken it as you said, that is, he gets notice on a certain date that his employment will end in a month, but he's still working for that month.
That's what we want.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I mean, that wouldn't be my read of the contract, but I mean, I can't speak for Mr. Johnson, but I would guess he probably wouldn't have a problem with that, so.
Yeah, we could probably tighten up that language if this is something we're gonna do.
I mean, because the way this is written, he has to provide us with 30 days written notice if he wants to terminate. We don't have to provide him with 30 days written notice. We can terminate, but if we do terminate, we have to provide him, we have to pay him for 30 days, so.
Right.
Commissioner Macy?
I'm just wondering if, in your conversations with Mr. Johnson, he gave indication how he came up with the number 18,000.
Not specifically. I think that that in his mind equates roughly to what his total compensation package was when he was the city manager. So that is the salary that he received and then also the benefits that he was receiving at the time. And knowing Don, I'm sure he probably took a look at what some other city managers in the area or in the state are making or have been making.
Commissioner Macy?
Do we have HR here? I mean, do we have the numbers for what he was and what the total compensation package was for the city manager?
I've shared that with the commission over the last few days. Mr. Vandelaar unfortunately is on vacation now. But I believe, unless someone has the specific information with them, I believe for this coming fiscal year, that the total compensation package for Mr. Johnson would have been budgeted at approximately $190,000, maybe a little bit more, in terms of $145,000 in salary, and then the balance being for other benefits, primarily his medical coverage.
So he now is on the retiree health care coverage plan, is that?
Mr. Johnson is retired, yes. He is receiving retiree health care from the city, that's correct.
Commissioner Douglas?
Mr. Gillum, have we explored, the Michigan Municipal League offers a list of prospective interim city managers. Have we explored with them the kinds of fees that they might charge?
We have not. We have been directed to do that by the commission. The way that the Michigan municipal executives maintain their interim managers list, they compile the information as to who potentially would be interested in serving as a manager just generally. They provide or compile documentation as to what that individual's experience is, what their availability is in terms of schedule, days of the week, and things like that. But in terms of the actual amount of compensation that is paid to any interim manager, that is strictly between the community and the manager. The MME, the Michigan Municipal Executives, are not involved in those discussions at all. So, no, we haven't contacted any potential candidates at all. My understanding, the conversations that I have had with other municipal attorneys is that kind of a common rate these days is somewhere in the area of $10,000 to $12,000 a month.
Does that include benefits or not?
It does not include benefits because, again, we're talking about someone who would be an independent contractor.
Okay. So that's all inclusive, total compensation?
Well, the specifics would have to be worked out. I mean, that's just in terms of salary as to whether or not an interim would want to come in and would want mileage, would want car allowance, things like that. I don't know. Those are things, again, that would have to be negotiated with that individual. And again, the 10 to 12 that I have is just kind of a general consensus as to what other attorneys have heard of or have been involved in. So, if I could, going back to the question of callback compensation, my memory was correct. I'm looking at, excuse me, I'm looking at the administrative rules for the executive department heads. Laid off or retired employees who receive a court order or request to appear in court to give testimony in a matter in which he was actively involved while actively employed, so on and so on and so on, shall be paid an hourly compensation. Such compensation shall be paid at an hourly rate equal to that paid to an active employee of the city classification that the laid-off employee held at the time of layoff or retirement. So in other words, what it's saying is whatever your hourly rate was at the time you left, that's the hourly rate you would be paid at for any callback compensation.
Any other questions for Mr. Gillum? Mr. Macy?
So I don't know if this is for Mr. Gillum or Mr. O'Donohue, but there's been some talk about city staff stepping up to fill in these positions, and I know city manager is a big job, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the department head's ability, or Mr. O'Donohue's ability to both lead this and for an extended period of time, because this search is not going to be over in a month. It's going to be, as we suspect, 5 or more months. So
I would agree it is a big job. It is definitely a full-time job. The police chief's job's a big job and a full-time job, and city attorney's job is a big job and a full-time job. During this month, I've had a tremendous amount of help and support from all the department heads, so they all absolutely have stepped up. But it is a long time, and I think all the staff is willing to do what you think is best, but it does seem to make sense to put somebody in place and they focus on that job solely. We have a lot going on in the city with all the developments and things like that, so it's not a normal time, you know, for the police department. We're coming into our big time with our festivals, so it's a challenge. So is that a nice, clear answer?
clear as mud. So I guess I also want to ask, it did happen sort of suddenly, and I've been thinking about what would happen if the assistant dean for us, just left 2 weeks' notice. There'd be a lot of things we didn't know how to do. So I'm wondering, because I think there is some value to having some continuity and someone who understands and knows what's been going on in the city carrying on. How much of that knowledge was passed on before Mr. Johnson left? Like, are there people who know where the keys are hidden?
There's plenty of people who will be able to figure it out. But everyone's got their own job. One of the things the city staff was not as robust as it used to be in years past. So every department head has a job that requires, it's a full-time job. So the city manager's job's a big job, and if the question is, could staff figure it out and limp us along, I think we could, yes. Are we going to be hitting on all cylinders like we should and the residents deserve? No, we're not going to.
So I guess it hadn't occurred to me that we could carry on without some kind of person carrying this on full-time. As you've said, it's a full-time job. But we do, and I think that's what I'm getting from you, is that I think I heard you say limp along, that staff knows what they're doing, they're competent and great staff, and they're carrying on their jobs as usual, but it's asking them to carry on the biggest job in the city, which is a full-time job, bits and pieces across many people, might be complicated. So I do think that we need someone to be leading the city. This is a long period of time to be without that person. You know, we've been getting a lot of emails from Mr. Gillum and having some conversations about this amount and the compensation and what's fair and what's reasonable and what makes sense in order to make sure the city is firing on all cylinders. We don't want to take a 6-month break from doing all the things that we need to do to make sure this city runs well. But $18,000 a month seems like a big number. And I'm having trouble putting a number on the worth of continuity. and I guess I'd love to hear what other people's feedback is, but my thought would be to return to Mr. Johnson with a modified contract that is more along the lines of what we would see with his previous compensation or what we would be paying another interim city manager. I guess it's not clear to me if he would take that, and then who knows where we are for another month or more while we look for an interim city manager. So looking for feedback.
I'll interject real quick. I think it's clear, and I appreciate the comments about the confidence in our staff and especially the confidence in Mr. O'Donohue. He is one of the best assets that this city has. He runs an excellent police department. The men and women in blue serve this community honorably, and it is a full-time job. There's a reason why we're one of the safest places in the country, why crime is down significantly, and that's because of the hard work of the men and women that Chief O'Donohue leads every single day. We are down from years in the past. We're down an employee from last year. We have 308 employees, down from 350, 360 years ago. Our staff is already doing more work for less pay, and I think it's really hard to ask somebody to do 2 jobs for a long period of time, especially for the citizens and taxpayers to sit back and just have everything go on idle. We all have things that need to be done. We all need ambulances that need to come to our door. We all need police to do an amazing job. We all need, water mains to get fixed and all these other things. So, part of this in the calculus is understanding that there's a value that we have to look at. I think also too, the interim, hiring another interim manager from the outside, we also have to gauge, does that, it's gonna take a month or 2 for that person to get brought up to speed as well. So we'll kind of be in an idle period anyways, if that's the route that we go. So there's a lot to consider here. I think one of the questions I have, because when you look at the 18,000, I'm trying to not look at it in terms of the amount, but in the terms of all the options that the city has in front of it, right? What is best for us? Not what's best for Mr. Johnson, not what's best for us as residents of this community. So, for example, let's just say we were to pull Mr. Gillum and put him in, okay? We would have to hire all the work that he does, because I know he works, I drive by in the morning, his car's here, and I drive by, he works a lot more hours than I do.
I just leave my car here.
Oh, you just leave, is that where the flyers are? See, Seinfeld is changing us all. Too bad you can't chalk your tires anymore. That's illegal. But, reality, my understanding is, and maybe I underpay or overpay, but, even if we were to backfill you with just a regular attorney, that's about $150 to $200 an hour, I would imagine, for legal services. Am I correct?
That's low.
Is that low?
Yeah.
Depending upon better attorneys?
Depending upon the kind of work they were gonna be doing, yeah.
Which, as a full-time job times 2,000 hours a year, at $200, you're talking $400,000 a year, compensation. That doesn't seem always financially prudent in that regard. So, I think a lot of great points were brought up tonight, but while we were on that subject that Commissioner Macy brought up, I thought I'd interject a few points that I wrote down here because they're getting to consume my paper. Commissioner Dubak.
I think a lot of really thoughtful and helpful comments about the terms here. But when we first got the news about Mr. Johnson, we had at least 2 discussions at this table about how to approach filling the gap. And I think there's pretty broad consensus that we need an interim, that asking staff to fill that gap for 3 to 5 months is too much of a burden. We're a full-time city. We have a lot going on. And asking staff to do that for 3 to 5 months isn't just unfair to staff and bad for morale, but also has a tremendous cost to it. So I think we need to approach this, understanding cost. I heard a lot of comments that are more like, spiteful or resentful about Mr. Johnson and how he left. The way that he did it, I think is not ideal, but he does have his own personal reasons for doing it that way. And this needs to be looked at through the prism of, yes, what's best for us, the taxpayers, those of us that live here in the city, what's going to get the best end result. So if we're looking at it, financially, if Mr. Johnson's overall compensation or what we were paying for a city manager is $190,000 a year, that's $16,000 a month. So yeah, this is $2,000 a month more than that, which over the period of 3 to 5 months is $6,000 to $10,000. Over what we generally pay, what we have been paying for a city manager. $6,000 to $10,000 difference over this 3 to 5 months. Now, whether or not that's fair is a fair conversation. Is that the right thing to do? That's a reasonable debate to be had, but that debate isn't about Mr. Johnson being good or bad, but what the work that's going to be done. So if it is that continuity for staff, one, if we bring in an interim city manager and for staff to go through a cultural and leadership transition, 3 months before we do it again, when we bring in the full-time city manager, there's productivity loss, there's morale loss, there's cultural and productivity, there's problems that happen in an institution when you have 2 leadership turnovers in 3 or 4 months. There's definitely value for that. Now, is that value $6,000 to $10,000? Let's have that conversation. Let's not make it sound like we're talking about hundreds of thousands or even 50,000. We're not talking about insane amounts of money when we're looking at keeping staff producing, understanding that there is a chain of command, there is someone in charge, that chief is able to do his job, Mr. Gillum's able to do his job without dropping any of the balls that we have in the air. Now, Mr. Johnson's understanding of everything that's happening certainly has value. Again, we can debate what that value is. Whereas someone else that comes in is not going to know many of those things. So yeah, maybe we can save, if we bring someone in at 14, that saves us, so $4,000 a month, that's maximum $20,000. But paying someone at 14 to come in and not know anything that's happening and have to learn it from the ground up, and by the time they know where the bathrooms are, their contract's up, I don't know if that's money better spent on behalf of ourselves and our residents, us as taxpayers. But again, that's a fair debate to be had. Some of the other terms, I think, can definitely be cleaned up. But the conversation we need to have here shouldn't just be about Mr. Johnson in a vacuum, but about this job and the job that needs to be done over the next 3 to 5 months, while we do a national search to find the best possible city manager to take our city into the future. I mean, and that's the jobs at hand. The last thing that we need, while we're trying to focus on that, is someone that doesn't really understand our city or all the things that we have going on, accidentally creating more problems just because they're new and they're learning the job while we're trying to find the person to do the job. And so to me, when we're talking about $6,000 to $10,000, just from the perspective of the city, everyone's looking at it from the perspective of Mr. Johnson, what they think he deserves or doesn't deserve. I'm trying to look at it as a taxpayer and a homeowner and someone that wants everything to keep going well, which, as you said, low crime, families moving in droves, unprecedented economic development, investing in the parks, and we're doing the things that need to keep being done, and it can't shut down for 3 to 5 months. So if we're going to have a big, huge debate about 5 to 10 grand, let's have it, but let's understand that that's the debate that we're having.
Commissioner Lavasser.
The figure is not $18,000 a month, it's $23,000 a month. We have to keep in mind that not only is it $18,000 that he's looking to collect on this contract, but roughly $5,000 a month on a pension, which is something that is coming from an account that has been underfunded by the city for a while, and we just borrowed millions, sold millions of dollars in bonds to try to catch that up, and now we're behind again on that fund. I want to make sure everyone understands the numbers here. Mr. Johnson's salary before retirement was roughly $12,000 a month, and about $4,000 a month in benefits, so he had $16,000. He's looking with this proposed contract to go from $16,000 to $23,000. It's an $8,000 bump for him. It's a bump. It's cost to the city of roughly an extra $8,000 a month when you factor in benefits and what have you. This is a situation most people in this type of position I would expect would give ample notice before they retire. And that certainly was an option that Mr. Johnson had. He could have sent an email at the end of May saying, hey, folks, I'm looking to retire December 31st. Now's the time to start looking for my replacement. He didn't choose to do it that way. He chose to give us 30 days notice with the statement, but I'll come back. On terms that were undefined at that time, he was essentially developing the most leverage he could to try to get as much from the city as he could. Now, what type of precedent are we setting for other employees of the city, other department heads, if we reward that by giving him additional funds? He's playing us. I can't support that. He's gaming the system, and I'm not going to support that.
Out of order. Commissioner Douglas.
Yeah, I'm gonna single out Mr. Gillum here. Sorry about this, but Mr. Gillum retired from the city, what, 3 years ago? Ish.
4 years ago.
Started claiming a pension.
5 years ago.
5 years. 5 years ago, started claiming a pension. Went to work in the private sector for 2 years. We found ourselves we had an interim city attorney. We decided we wanted to look externally for a city attorney, and as it happened, Mr. Gillum was available and interested in the job. He's still collecting that pension, but that's all he's getting from us is his pension and his salary and no additional benefits. Mr. Johnson's in the same boat, and quite literally because he likes to sail. So he could be out on Lake Michigan in his sailboat collecting his monthly pension, and we could be paying an interim, some other interim city manager, or he could be here working with us, bringing that institutional knowledge and history and experience to the table. And I don't find the fact that he's collecting that pension to be relevant at all, because he's going to be getting it no matter what. I mean, we're still going to be paying it. So I take that out of the equation. I believe we need an interim city manager. Commissioner DeBuck made the point very effectively. We are an important city with important things going on that need to be managed. And I look at an interim city manager other than Don Johnson as just a placeholder. And I take to heart the fact that they're gonna, spend a month or 6 weeks just figuring things out. I've looked at the list of prospective interim city managers through the Michigan Municipal League, and there aren't many names there, and I tend to know communities around Michigan through my civic or external involvements. There aren't a lot of people there that I jump up and down about as appearing to be the kind of person who could step into this job and really do it. And we don't even, of those that are even remotely qualified, we don't know if they're available. They may be interviewing for jobs somewhere else, or they may be on vacation. So, I mean, if we were to say today, reject Don Johnson's proposal and start looking for an interim city manager, it could be 6 weeks before we nail somebody down. And with all due respect to the chief and Mr. Gillum and our extremely competent staff managers, I don't think we should leave the ship that rudderless. And I'm also going to point out that Mr. Gillum's number 2 in his department has been out of the office on an extended medical leave, and if we're lucky, he'll be back in 2 weeks, but then that's what the doctors have been saying every 2 weeks for the past however long. So our legal department is already stretched very thin. Mr. Gillum's told me that his other staffer, who handles prosecutions over at district court, is going on vacation. So Mr. Gillum's car will be legitimately parked here 24 hours a day for the course of the next, 10 days. So I do support the idea of hiring a city manager, and I think to me it's just a matter of what we counteroffer Mr. Johnson with. I agree that I think $18,000 is unreasonable, but perhaps we can bring to the table a discussion of what is a reasonable number and make a counteroffer.
Commissioner Prush.
I really think we only have 2 choices here. It's been very clear to us from the beginning, when we've talked to Chief O'Donoghue and other members of the staff, that there is no one in the organization now that is interested in jumping up and down and saying, oh, I can do this, I will step in place. They all have their enormously complicated jobs to do all by themselves, which they love, and to take on another additional burden of another full-time job, so to speak, is out of the question. It's not good for the organization, it's not good for the taxpayers, it's not good for the employees, it's not good for the community. So we have to keep that option off the table. It's just not available. They don't want that responsibility. They're very content doing exactly what they're doing, and it would be inappropriate for us to just pile on. Number one, they don't have to do it, and number 2, for them to feel guilted into doing it is not appropriate, and it's not good for the organization. So that leaves us with 2 options. We either bring Mr. Johnson back with whatever terms we think are appropriate, or we go out into the world and find an interim city manager from there who has no experience within the community at all and brings him or her into the situation, goes through an orientation and learning process for a month or 2 while we do the search, which will start probably next week because that's when the RFPs for the search firms come back in. And we're transitioning not only an outside of the organization interim city manager, but then at the end of that hiring process, we are also transitioning the permanent city manager, however that long that would be, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, however long it takes. So the organization is jolted not only by the retirement announcement, but also by the interim city manager hiring and having to get used to that, and then the new city manager a couple of months later. That's hard on the organization. That's extraordinarily hard on the community as a whole. It's hard on the employees. So I don't think that that's a good option either. So I think we're back to countering counter-offering the financial terms of this contract and bringing back Mr. Johnson. Sure, you know, it would have been nice if he had given us more notice, but he didn't. It would have been nice if he had said, oh, I'm going to retire 6 months from now, you have 6 months to hire somebody else, but he didn't. We are left with a situation as it is, not what we think it should have been. So we're dealing with the situation as it is in front of us now. And we've got two choices. We either go to the outside world and find somebody else, or we bring back Mr. Johnson on terms that we find acceptable. That's it. We only have two choices. And that's kind of where we are tonight. I agree that the compensation of $18,000 is excessive, and something that is more appropriate should be our counteroffer. I struggle as to what that should be. I think 10 or 12, which I think is at the low end of perhaps what interims might be earning these days, is pretty low. But on the other hand, 18 is awfully high. So that's kind of where I am.
I'll just echo, my finance background. When we look at whoever is making a pension, like Mr. Gillum, when we made the decision to bring him back, who he's done an exceptional job since he's been back. He did an exceptional job when he was here. I think adding that to the analysis and tally is, not appropriate. It's a sunk cost. You owe that obligation no matter what. So as far as our calculus is concerned, adding it in there only tries to sensationalize an issue that isn't there, or tries to demean perhaps, Mr. Johnson in some way. So for me, I'm not considering that. That's a sunk cost. We have to pay it no matter what. So again, going back to what's best for the city, I also agree that it's going to be very difficult for staff, and very difficult in putting, our citizens at risk in the event that, we're overworking our staff, especially leadership. Arguably the most important job in the city. The police chief, fire chief, they both report to the city manager. This is the CEO of our city. It's a very important job. And stretching it and spreading it over, 10% of everybody's job, I think doesn't serve us well. We're not talking about profits here. We're talking about public safety. And I think that we have to have somebody in a full-time capacity. I think given the time frame of a few months until we hit or discover who the next city manager is going to be, arguably makes sense to stick with somebody that already can hit the ground running. We have a lot of important things ahead of us. We have the marijuana legislation that we're trying to figure out. We have stormwater utility that we're trying to figure out. We have a number of issues that we can't lose any months on. And as far as the personal reasons, I will take exception to anyone, arguing that Mr. Johnson had a scheme in mind or was attempting to hoodwink the city. I think if anyone had any conversation with Mr. Johnson over the last few months, they'd understand a little bit more about his personal circumstance and situations and his reasoning and decision to retire. And I think it's reckless to, demean somebody's character without even having an opportunity to speak to Mr. Johnson and understand his reasons and ideas for the situation that we're in. So I would just ask everybody, out of the courtesy and respect for other people, that we just don't jump to conclusions about one's character. So the 18,000, I think we're gonna get down, we don't know exactly what, somebody else would charge. We know it's in the range 10 to 12 to the existing salary to, heck, somebody might take it for what other managers are getting paid across the state, which can range from 120 to 185,000, 250,000. We heard with Grant. We don't. It's compensation isn't just a rate when you're talking about a city manager, even an interim one. It's all about the skill set that they bring to the table and what value does the organization, in this case, the city, garner from that. So, I personally want to be careful and make sure that we have continuity. I'm eager to hear what my colleagues say about the amount, but at the same time, I don't want to risk, all the work that we have going on right now and stress staff even for another 2 months or 3 months to figure this out any longer because of the risk that it has to taxpayers and to the public safety element of our community over a few $1,000s. So I want to make sure that we make the right decision, but we got to, again, not look at Mr. Johnson as a person, but what's best for the city as a whole, given the options that are in front of us. Commissioner Macy.
So, just doing really basic math, His take-home pay before was about $12,000 a month, and his entire compensation package was about $16,000 a month. So $14,000 a month? Anybody?
I'm kind of there.
Sorry, what was that?
I said I'm sorry. I said his take-home had been about $12,000 a month, and his entire compensation package, including benefits, had been about $16,000 a month. So then I querulously said $14,000 a month, and people kind of nodded.
Keep in mind too that he'll have to pay, you know, I mean, we're also dependent on him saying, yes, this isn't a unilateral agreement. He'll have to pay another 7.5%, I think, for self-employment tax. So whatever calculus you have, make sure that, you know, if you're doing the numbers that way.
More complicated math than I was
It
doing.
is more complicated.
Yeah.
Commissioner West.
But had he chosen to give us until December 31st before he retired, he would not be draining an extra $5,000 per month off of our pension fund. That's an extra $5,000 that should be considered in the calculation here. I think if you're starting anywhere, you're going at that $16,000, which was the value of his contract per month while he's employed, and you have to subtract out that $5,000. So you're closer to $11,000 at that point.
So Commissioner Lavasser, I'm just going to make one point because I heard you use the word draining. I don't know if you intended to use that word.
I absolutely intended to use
well,
that.
I don't think Mr. Gillum is draining our pension system. I don't think the number of retired police officers that we have occasionally working in our evidence room or whatever are draining. When you spend decades working for your municipality, you earn your pension.
Right,
and I wouldn't consider that a drain. I think it's fair to say, to understand his, from a negotiation perspective, fair to understand what his compensation is with his pension and what might trigger his desire to accept a number or not. But I wouldn't call something a drain when somebody's entitled to it when they earned it over 30, 40
but
years.
he's served in a leadership role in this community. He, more than any other employee of this city, had a duty and obligation to make sure that our pension funds were properly funded. And we had to borrow tens of millions of dollars just a few years ago because they weren't properly funded. And we find ourselves yet today with a deficit, even after borrowing tens of millions of dollars, selling tens of millions of dollars in bonds. So when I say he's draining the system, I believe he is draining the system. He's retiring, but not retiring, and he's getting the funds.
Order, everyone.
He's getting the funds out of those accounts that are dedicated, intended for the employees of this city.
Commissioner Macy.
Okay, so I think we know where Commissioner Lavasser stands. That sounds a little bit vindictive towards Mr. Johnson. But I'm just going to repeat what I've heard a couple times up here, is that the pension is not consideration for me. The interim city managers that we had the list of from the Michigan Municipal League, many of them were retired city managers from other communities. So they are also drawing down pensions. And I certainly wasn't going to tell them, what's your pension amount? I'm going to subtract it from what we're going to pay you. That's just the way of things. He's making a pension. That's one fact. How much are we going to pay an interim city manager? That's what we have to decide.
Commissioner Douglas.
I do want to set the record straight here. When Commissioner Lavasser says we borrowed tens of millions of dollars to fund our pensions, we had already borrowed those tens of millions of dollars from our employees as a pledge to them. They said, we will take less money because the city will guarantee our pension. So we had already borrowed those dollars on the backs of our city employees. When we borrowed money, when we sold bonds to fund our pension funds, we not only were helping fulfill the obligation that we had to our employees, but the net cost of that borrowing was less than what we were paying out of our general fund, and it freed up money in our general fund. So, sorry?
$2 million
$2 million a year. So it's not accurate to say we borrowed money to fund our pensions. We had already borrowed that money from our employees.
It was already debt. We refinanced it. We save about $2 million a year in cash flow because of it. And Mr. Johnson inherited a system that hadn't been funded for years. And I'm not defending Mr. Johnson. I just want to make sure the facts are out there. At one time, we were looking at selling public parks to fund city operations, and now we're sitting on a $15.5 million fund balance. So I think it's a little bit of a mischaracterization to say Mr. Johnson put us into some sort of financial harm. You can argue about a number of different things, but I think we just got to stick to the facts and make sure our arguments are solid.
Commissioner Dubak. No, I think you've done a fine job of correcting that gross mischaracterization of Mr. Johnson's financial.
Come on, everyone, we know the rules. Mr. Dubak Commissioner Dubak has the floor, please. Let's have some respect. You had public comment, and now it's Commissioner Dubak's turn. Thank you.
Gross mischaracterization of Mr. Johnson's fiscal stewardship of the city and the role he played in a pension deficit, which actually is impacting every city in the state for a wide variety of reasons. He actually exerted leadership similar to the exact same strategy utilized by Brooks Patterson in Oakland County to bond out, so we had the cash in hand to invest, to fulfill our obligations to our residents, while still providing high-quality service. While meeting those pension and healthcare obligations to folks who worked in good faith on contract with our city. It's actually, we restructured the debt and made it visible. There's folks out there having fun with numbers, trying to make it sound like it's new debt. The debt existed, and the public didn't really have a view to it, but now we do, because now it's a bond obligation instead of an unfunded pension obligation. So not only did he help address the gap, but actually gave the public a clear view to it. He didn't create the debt. I mean, that's just patently, provably false.
Commissioner Pruish.
I think it's also worthwhile to point out that there was a period of time in the city's history, starting in the mid-90s, where for the period of about 7 or 8 years, I can't remember exactly, the city made absolutely zero contributions to the pension system whatsoever, which meant that the pension debt exploded in terms of the size. And if you look back and notice that period of time, there were no extenuating circumstances like a deep recession or a depression or any other things going on. They just wanted to spend the money in other ways. They increased employee levels up a little bit way beyond where they are now, and contributed not one penny to the pension system for almost 8 years. And that is why the pension system is, for the most part, in the situation that it is. We've been able to correct it by bonding for it and restructuring the debt, which has helped. And Mr. Johnson was the primary mover and shaker behind that effort. And when he became finance director in Royal Oak, right after that period of time when there were no contributions at all to the pension system, he righted the ship, so to speak, put us back on track to making whatever contributions we could to build back the strength of the pension system. But we are paying for that negligence of city commissioners 20 years ago who made no contributions whatsoever. And when he came in as finance director, which was his position before he was city manager, turned that around. And I think that's an important point to make.
Maybe arguably so he could collect his pension.
Yes, perhaps
that's
so that
where
when
the
he ever
conflict
retired,
resides.
there would be something there for him. Which I think brings us back to the question of what are we talking about in terms of salary compensation? Because he's going to get a pension no matter what we do.
Right. Commissioner Dubak and then Commissioner Douglas.
Yeah, I mean, again, this should be focused on filling this job, filling the need for the city in the most efficient and effective way possible, and not a conversation about character assassination or, political aspirations. So let's keep it focused on getting this job done. We all agreed it's a job that needs to be done. We've had this conversation twice. The question is who and how much. I think there's a strong case to be made for continuity, both for staff's sake and the city's sake and the number of projects that we have. I'm not going to cut off my nose to spite my face. I wish we had had more time to make this decision. But that does not undo Mr. Johnson's 10 years of service to this city. And so it might be politically convenient to try and make this the entirety of his career, but it's just simply not. So we have someone that we know is competent, knows the players in the city, already has a leadership style and a culture that is not going to be radically disruptive to staff 3 months before a new leader comes in, and that will be radically disruptive to staff. So I think it's the clearest pathway is moving forward with Mr. Johnson if we can find terms that are agreeable. So we've discussed a couple things. One, amending the contract to give us the ability to amend the end date with 30 days notice. Not terminate, but amend the end date of the contract with 30 days notice. Therefore, if we hire a city manager quicker than expected, and we don't need Mr. Johnson for, October, November, December, we don't have to pay an additional month's worth of work for work not done. And I think that's reasonable to say 30 more days of work, and then that's the end of the contract. Is that something I think that's doable, or is that just?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
in terms of the contract, absolutely.
I mean, legally, I'm not saying something insane, right? That's doable. Okay. I'm like one non-lawyer up here.
I'm the other. We got three.
We also need to, I would just like to clarify that document cost, just to make sure we've, considered any possible liabilities there, but making sure that the intention is clear and that there's no, open ends that, could concern residents, whether or not it's a real risk, what Mr. Johnson's intentions are. Just make sure that that's clarified in that language. Was there another thing besides the amount?
No,
Was those two things?
I think so.
What?
That's just what I have.
Commissioner Douglas?
Well, the witness fees. I mean, Mr. Gillum has established that it's highly unlikely that he's going to be called back to testify. Our executive service agreement specifies that any employees who have resigned or retired and are called back to testify are paid at the hourly rate that they were paid when they were in that position. That I would think that's something that I would lean towards, specifying that as the compensation rate for testimony, as opposed to $200 an hour.
Yeah, why have something different? Just align it to what he had before with
Right.
his previous contract. Sorry, Commissioner.
I'm gonna make a motion. Let's see how this
Okay.
plays out. I would move that we make a counter offer to Mr. Johnson of $14,000 a month. Thank you, Commissioner Macy. That we specify that we can, as Commissioner DeBuck said, end the contract with 30 days' notice with the understanding that Mr. Johnson will work during those remaining 30 days. That any witness fees be at the rate established in the executive, what do you call it, Dave, for the
The
executive?
administrative rules for the executive department heads.
That. So that would be my 3 points of my motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Macy. Discussion. Commissioner Douglas?
Well, as Mr. Gillum pointed out, just an informal research said that typical interim city managers around Michigan are getting $10,000 to $12,000 a month. And that would be for somebody with no, institutional knowledge whatsoever. So an additional $2,000 a month, I think, is a fair amount to pay for Mr. Johnson's experience and knowledge and familiarity with with the city. And I think the two other features have been, especially the severance versus notice, have been adequately discussed.
Other discussion?
Oh. Sorry. Well, we'll want to put a date on the offer. That is, maybe make that part of this motion, that we counter offer and give him.
An expiration on it?
Yes.
Respond?
You want me to add that to my?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, modifying my motion, or
Amending, offer an amendment.
I'm offering an amendment to give him 7 days. Anybody, does that sound good? 7 days to respond, period.
We have an amendment supported by Commissioner Macy. Discussion on the amendment. So right now, this is just the amendment that if the motion does pass, whether you agree or disagree with the motion, this is the amendment to say that whatever offer, if it is extended, if it is voted for, he has 7 days to respond. So it's not an endorsement of the motion. It's just knowing that if it goes through, that he would have 7 days to respond. Commissioner Macy.
Don't know if this is appropriate discussion for this amendment, but I think it is. Should we also at the same time be directing city staff or have the subcommittee meet again about potential other interim city managers? Because if we don't hear back from him for a week and then we have to meet again a week later, suddenly we are going many more weeks without, and he says, no, I'm saying, and because we're dropping this fairly substantially from what he came with to us after extended discussions with Mr. Gillum. So I'm wondering if we should get started on a backup plan.
So my recommendation would be is that we get through the amendment, we get through the motion, see where it goes. Because if the motion fails, then we have to do that anyways.
Okay.
If the motion passes, then we can make a motion that says we'll have this meeting, and cancel it if he accepts.
Okay, gotcha.
So just a little bit of a scenario planning there. Okay, so right now we have the amendment to the motion on the table. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, this brings us to the original motion, which is to observe the contract in front of us, adjusting the 30-day notice to be really, instead of a severance type situation, to be really a compensation. Like, we have to give 30 days notice, he'll get paid for that, but he has to work for those 30 days. As well as return the $200 an hour to basically what he's entitled to today under his previous contract, or any employee, any department head is for testimony at their regular wage. It's very unlikely, but in the event they're called to testify, it is their time. It is what's been negotiated over the years and is part of the compensation package of department heads. And then also adjust it with a salary of $14,000 a month. Any other discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, so now we have all of that. He has 7 days to respond, which then brings us to Commissioner Macy's point, if she'd like to make a motion or discuss that topic relative to, in the event that Mr. Johnson declines the offer, because it is,
So when-
4,000 less than what.
You were suggesting we were gonna need another meeting for this? Does that mean we all have to look at our calendars again? So a tentative meeting in case Mr. Johnson declines the offer. So we set the meeting, then we can cancel it if he accepts, and if he doesn't accept, we meet and talk about going forward. Is that what's happening? I feel like this was more your idea. You should be telling.
Yeah, no, I think what it is that, so the motion passed, so he'll be getting a new revised offer
Right.
from Mr. Gillum. He'll have 7 days from tonight to decide. He'll either decide right away, reject it right away, or, wait till the 11th hour and decide or reject. But in the event that he doesn't accept, or he rejects it immediately, then it seems to me, based on the conversation I heard tonight, that none of us feel that it's appropriate to have current staff cover the city manager's job. So we would have to go with another interim solution. And so that could be some constellation of whatever, but nonetheless, it would require a financial decision from this body moving forward. So I guess we have a meeting on the, because we're off, aren't we, that first week? So we don't have a meeting until August 22nd?
No. 12.
We have a meeting, there it is, whoops. August 12th, which that's 12 days. So I guess we could do something the week of August 7th, because today is the 29th.
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at the calendar.
August?
Yeah, because today's July 29th. 7 days from now is going to be August 5th. He has to decide. So anything after August 5th, which is Monday, a week from now, which would be Tuesday, August 6th, Wednesday, August 7th, so.
You won't get it till tomorrow. You won't get it till tomorrow, right?
Right.
Well, I told him I would call him tonight. Okay. You won't have something in writing until tomorrow.
Yeah, so from his point of view, it might be 6 days, but from the commission's point of view, it was 7 days.
Okay.
Commissioner Lavasser.
I don't see the need for another meeting. I think we could decide right now what course we're going to take if Mr. Johnson does not accept this contract. We don't necessarily have to wait and see what his decision is. We could decide right now, this is the path we're going to go by. I will disagree with one statement the mayor made. I have complete faith in the chief and with our city attorney to lead us during this time. I would, rather than go out and find a replacement city manager, would want to have them lead the ship during these months, and would rather they go out and find support staff to help them in their usual daily duties, which I suspect may be an easier role to fill than to bring in a interim city manager who's cold.
We can look at that option as part of this discussion with interim, because the interim is going to be either hiring from the outside or bringing someone else from staff. But for example, like backfilling Mr. Gillum, apparently legal rates that I'm aware of are really low. Even with really low legal rates, that will cost us $400,000 a year run rate. So I'd like to understand that before we go ahead and just authorize that. So I'd like to have some discussion about that next step and scheduling the meeting so we're all aligned. So if we decide to go down the route of interim, or if we decide to take Mr. Gillum or Chief O'Donohue and then decide to backfill their positions, what that would look like and what that would cost for a handful of months, that's a discussion we'd have. Interim just doesn't mean that we're going to the outside. It means that we're not going to Mr. Johnson. Commissioner Macy.
But it is true that we could set up the subcommittee for the search to meet instead of the whole commission.
Sure.
And then the subcommittee, because we're gonna have to act pretty soon anyway, because we're gonna get the RFPs back, right?
So what we could just authorize, leave it up to the subcommittee to find a convenient time.
Yeah, and then
To bring in
if
some
we need a
candidates.
special meeting, then,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
Anyone want to make a motion? Mr. Dubak?
I'll move that the subcommittee identify a date to meet in order to identify, should Mr. Johnson reject the offer, in order to identify a pool of candidates to bring forward at the next commission meeting.
Okay. We have a second? Second by Commissioner Perush. Discussion?
Just clarification, so what timing are you envisioning here? That the subcommittee would try to meet this week?
Prior to the next commission meeting, so that at that commission meeting, you can make a the subcommittee can make a recommendation on candidates, like a preferred candidate, or
Okay.
if you have 2 or
If
3 candidates
necessary.
to discuss, if necessary.
Thanks, I understand now.
Commissioner Macy?
But we can, I mean, regardless, we can talk about what we hear back from the RFP. So
Sure.
we should have something to bring to the commission in any case.
Yes.
So, and I think that's ending this week, yes?
The 6th?
I just point out, it's, the RFP is doing the 6th. I don't think we'll meet our normal timetable for getting the information out if you wanted to go for the 12th, but you'd be able to discuss it, most likely.
Oh, I see, okay.
Because of the
But still, the 6th is now the date for both of these moments, really, so sometime between the 6th and the 12th.
I think they're due on so probably the 7th, 8th.
Okay. Everyone understand? All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. All right. Anything else? I think we have the adjournment as item number 4, unless anybody wishes to bring anything else up germane to this topic. I ask that anything you bring up is relevant to this. Commissioner Dubak?
To adjourn.
That's relevant. We have a motion by Commissioner Dubak. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Douglas. Discussion on this adjournment?
Except for us 3, because we have to figure out a date to meet.
Come on over and we'll work that out.
Better than 7, trying to
Right.
figure out a date. All right, with no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned.